fact that he literally sucks as a president based on what he promised, you know? He says he's going to reduce the budget and find all the fraud, waste, and abuse in the government budget, and then fires Elon Musk like 2 months later. The Doge cuts go out the window. Said he was going to cut the budget, said he was going to cut the deficit, ends up adding $3 trillion to the deficit with that big, beautiful bill, which is the same thing as Biden's, you know, the omnibus bill that he released, the Inflation Reduction Act. What a joke. That thing boosted inflation to 9%. So Trump has been doing a shit job. And in order for him to have any chance of winning the midterm elections, what he needs to do is have the interest rates low so people can go buy houses, cars, things just all around are more accessible. So people kind of have this false sense of progress. And he needs low gas prices because that's one of the most immediate ways you can sort of you can help people's budgets is by getting gas from 279 or whatever down to 212, down to 190. People feel the immediate impacts there. And so that's why Trump is threatening Jerome Powell. We'll play this hostage video here for you guys in a second. If you guys are just hopping on the Zoom, basically I'm looking for two scenarios. If we get a closure, everything is an if-then scenario when you're game planning your plan A and your plan B. Okay, so my plan A is going to be the shorts. Okay, and that's basically just a closure below this high right here, a move back to the downside, and a closure under, and then a retest under my sell zone. I get those three components, the closure, the break back under and kind of shift back in, and then the retest and lower high closure. Then I'll be shorting this thing down all the way to TP2. Understood? That's plan A. Plan B is if we get a break of these highs, then I'm going to wait for the retest back in. Once I start to see the higher lows form, then I'm going to enter here for the longs. That's scenario B. So selling, scenario A, buying, scenario B. Make sense? Besides DT, anybody else? You guys get this? If you're driving, don't even sweat it. If you're not driving, just throw a one in the chats. If you're busy, you're at work or whatever, don't sweat it either. We're still operating on a range, and so you guys know how we trade. Prioritize the structure and the location in that structure. So if the structure is, we have this range right here where we've clearly established a low, because when the market came here, the buyer stepped in. So it was a high interest zone for buyers. Again, when the market came to retest this area, we had a high interest zone for buyers. That's multiple confirmations. It clearly shows that there's buying interest at that zone. Selling pressure here. Every time the market gets here, we reject, 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 reject. Now, the more times that it touches, eventually you're sort of getting to the point where it's going to break through, right? So like the more times that the market comes up to break this ceiling, the ceiling starts to get weaker and weaker until eventually it breaks, like a video game. You just keep jumping up and hitting the ceiling, jumping up and hitting the ceiling, jumping up and hitting the ceiling. Now, if you're betting on whether your character is going to reject off the ceiling or not, that's what we're trading. It's like every time it gets to the ceiling, I'm expecting it to drop. And so that's how we can make our money. But we also have to understand the more times we touch, the higher the probability is of the final break. Understood? And so in this range model, the way that we trade, we're looking for shorts because we sell high and we buy low. But knowing that the market kind of weakens the zone the more times that it touches, we have to also understand that there's conflicting information here for both buyers and sellers. So that's why my number one assumption is the shorts because we are at a premium level, right? When we're at a very high, the first assumption should be to look for sells. All right, what I'm going to do here is actually draw a fib let's look at our daily range, or sorry, our smaller time frame, kind of hourly range here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this previous impulse, and we're actually at the 88.6. This is the perfect selling opportunity right here. I'm a little bit late to the party. Let's see if I can show you guys this on TradingView. I'm not going to trade on TradingView though. All right, this is what the shorts would look like. Hopefully we get one more retest up inside this zone. Beautiful, beautiful shorts. Let me actually move this up. Um, get rid of this. And let's get rid of this. Beautiful. All right, now what I'll do is jump down to the smaller time frames and then set my alerts. I'm going to set an alert for the retest. So if it comes back in and gives me a good retest, I need to know. And if the market hits TP1, I would like to be aware as well. I can go ahead and remove my TP1 fib just to kind of get it out of the way so it's a little bit cleaner. And then I can kind of jump up to the 30-minute time frame and just watch on this time frame. Okay, the dashed lines that you guys see right here, those are the only zones I really care about. Everything else is a distraction. Okay, it's either going to come back up, reject so it can drop, or it's going to continue dropping in. Like, or I mean, it could continue to the upside, but either way, we'll know if it comes back inside this range right here. So everything else outside of this box is now irrelevant, and we can kind of stick to the smaller time frames here. Now I'll do this on a different, yeah, I'll do this on a different broker feed just so I can kind of have a clean. Right. Let's go ahead and get rid of these fibs. I'll do this again. Body to wick. Grab the fib. Go ahead and throw the fib back up. Beautiful. Sitting right at the 88.6. Put our short position at the entry. Stop loss at the extension. And honestly, TP2 sounds much more reasonable. All right, makes sense? Doesn't get easier than this. I'll put this up in the chats for the ChartAddicts members. Let me make sure I have my entries adjusted. I'm pausing this my screen share for just a second. Let me go check.
That he literally sucked.
Trade evade. And also, let's get on to the Jerome Powell video too. So I'll pull both of those up. I'm telling you, he literally dropped a whole hostage video. This was 11 hours ago.
This is the
Dropped this right before the market opened. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. If you haven't already subscribed, if you have subscribed, drop a like, drop a comment, just so that I'm pretty sure we're shadow banned. I'm not sure why. Probably has something to do with the cursing. But if you guys could do that for us, that'd be awesome. That'd be a great help. All right. This is Jerome Powell talking about the recent risk of an indictment coming from Donald Trump. So just so you guys kind of give you guys the backstory, Donald Trump does not like the high interest rate environment that Jerome Powell has been holding. Jerome Powell has just seen an environment where we had 9% inflation, and we almost had this runaway inflation crisis in America, which is not good. And so Jerome Powell is being very cognizant of the fact that if we don't get this inflation problem under control once and for all, we have to keep rates high, let the economy cool down, let everything come back to normal, and then we can, like, when The Federal Reserve is only ever supposed to drop interest rates when there is a recession or some kind of emergency. So by keeping the interest rates high, we have a lot of ammo that if there isn't the next crisis, the Fed doesn't have to drop interest rates to zero to stimulate the economy. They can drop the interest rates 1, 2, 3%, maybe even half a percent, 50 basis points, and that would have a massive impact on stimulating the economy. So I think it's a really smart move on Jerome Powell's part to kind of have some dry powder on the sidelines that we can use. But Trump wants to win the midterm elections. And so he wants the opposite. He wants low interest rates. He wants to stimulate the economy now. That way, the economy has this false sense of productivity. You guys understand kind of this trade off? So Jerome Powell understands the real economic risk of lowering interest rates right now for no reason. Trump just wants to win the midterms. So he doesn't care. He just wants Jerome Powell to lower the rates. So because he can't force Jerome Powell because of the Fed independence mandate, which makes them separate from the federal government and operates as an independent agency that controls our currency. So Trump can't impact Jerome Powell, and he can't send him to jail for doing his job because there's, I think it was called federal immunity, or I think it might be like agency immunity or something, where you cannot get indicted for doing your job, right? And so Trump is trying to sue him civilly or trying to get him into some kind of civil indictment because of the renovations at the Fed, something where he feels, they're trying to grab at straws here, saying Jerome Powell is overspending on these renovations, which is very true. But this is really stupid. Jerome Powell is not a big talker. He definitely never comments on political issues, even when he's at these FOMC press conferences or he's speaking at a college. So for him to get out here and make this hostage video kind of situation, this warning kind of video, it's a very big deal. Jerome Powell has been working for over 4 administrations in the federal government. Well, not the federal government, but in the Fed. He worked at the Treasury before, but then in the Fed. Let's listen to Jerome Powell talk about this himself, but that's a little bit of context on what the hell is going on here. Before we do that, I'll actually do these side by side. That way we can watch the charts and have Jerome Powell side by side. Beautiful. Let's see what Jay Powell has to say.
On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. Just a quick kind of correction here. It was not a civil suit. This is actually a criminal indictment. I didn't even know that they were served a grand jury subpoena. A grand jury subpoena, guys, is not a real trial of, based on a jury of your peers. A grand jury trial or a grand jury sort of indictment is really easy to get because it's kind of a one-sided trial. The prosecutors get to basically pitch their case to this grand jury, and the grand jury gets to decide whether they want to prosecute or not. They don't introduce any conflicting evidence, and so if they want to get an indictment, they will. Is that old saying? A grand jury can indict a sandwich or whatever it is. So threatening him with a grand jury subpoena means that, like, brother, we will and can send you to jail if you don't play along, which is a massive threat. And now I guess it makes sense why Jerome Powell had to make this video, let everybody know, like, Trump is out of his fucking mind, guys. I'm gonna be honest with you. Between like snatching up foreign leaders, bombing random fishermen on the coast, bombing nuclear facilities out of nowhere, threatening the Fed, threatening judges. Like, bro, we gotta step. Somebody's gotta step in and get this shit under control. But let's see what Jerome Powell says. I'll restart this in the beginning.
On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure.
Oof.
This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings.
Yeesh.
It is not about Congress's oversight role, The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people.
Let's play that again. We'll go through this piece by piece here in a second because this is huge. This is huge, huge news.
On Friday, the department.
I guarantee we're going to go on YouTube here and kind of look through the news outlets and see what everybody's saying about this. I want to see what CNBC is saying. I want to see what Bloomberg is saying. But I guarantee this is the talk of the day. I can almost guarantee it. This is the viral story of the day.
Of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned in part a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through
who's in profits on this trade?
Testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people.
Okay, so piece by piece, let's go through this.
A multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings.
So he did give a testimony last year, and he mentioned that they were going to be spending, I think, upwards of like $3 billion. The original plan was like $2.6 billion to renovate the Fed building. Now, the Fed building in DC is extremely nice, but it's also built on top of like really on the border of water. And so they have to build support infrastructure underground because all the Federal Reserve buildings are just as deep. They go down. They have just as many floors underground as they do going up. If you guys live near a Federal Reserve building, I used to live next to one in Richmond, Virginia. They had like, I don't know, it was like 40 floors or 50 floors up. And they also had 40 or 50 floors underground. It's a massive undertaking, especially if you're trying to build next to a waterbed. It's just an unnecessarily expensive project, but Jerome Powell wants to renovate it. Now, Trump being a builder, and I know that he's building the Grand Ballroom in the White House, which is completely ridiculous, but I think he's spending around $300 million, which is ridiculous. But compared to $2.7 billion, I think Trump knows how to stretch a dollar when it comes to construction. And so what Trump is basically kind of alluding to here is that Jerome Powell is giving these expensive contracts to all of his friends. That way they can just inflate the numbers and the cost of the renovation so everyone can get paid. Okay. So originally, this is kind of where a lot of the threats came from, and he's saying that this one's a little bit different.
Buildings. Accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure.
See, that's true. The Trump administration has been trying to grab at straws, throw spaghetti at the wall, and see what sticks just to indict Jerome Powell or to get him to cave so he can lower rates. So, in the broader context, this is just another one of those plays from the Trump administration to mess with Jerome Powell. I think we get one more drop to the downside. That's where I'm going to close my positions, or I'm going to cover. I'll probably leave one or two contracts cover and trail. But if the market continues to wick like this at this zone, there's a good chance that it just forms a bullish candle and blows through. All right, so be very mindful that this is looking like if it continues to form support here, we could see a bullish move up to the upside. All right, I'm going to be waiting for one more drop down to fill this wick, and then I'll be jumping out of probably the majority of my position, hovering with the stop loss or covering my stops, and then just trailing the stops as it continues to TP1. Okay.
This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor, focused solely on our mandate of price stability and maximum employment. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people.
So it's heating up. Let's see what the rest of, I mean, he really didn't say anything besides this is just another plan from the administration to, to try to pressure the Fed. But besides that, now I'll be honest with you guys, the only good news that I've seen from Trump, the only thing that I've seen that's been positive is that he's trying to introduce a bill, which he hasn't actually done yet. And he can't really introduce a bill because he's a president. Congress introduces bills, the president signs them into law. But they want to ban Blackstone and BlackRock from buying up residential homes because they've been pricing average people out of the market. The reason that housing prices are so high right now is because BlackRock and some of these other companies are taking up all the houses. You have corporations and commercial enterprises that are buying up residential units and residential properties so that regular families can't even buy them. In an environment where interest rates are this high, normally housing prices come down. If the interest rate is dissuading you from going to get a mortgage right now, the only way that sellers can get their house sold is to drop the prices, right? So normally there's an inverse relationship between interest rate and asset prices, or interest rates and specifically here mortgage prices or housing prices, excuse me. But the only reason that now we have a really high interest rate and housing prices are ridiculously high is because we have these major corporations buying up every time a house goes on sale, and they just keep the housing prices just keep staying elevated. There's been like a floor or a support or backstop to the housing market. You ask some of the advocates for Blackstone being able to buy residential houses, they'll just say some bullshit about the '08 financial crisis. Like, what's his dumbass from Florida? Byron Donalds, whatever his name is. He was like, well, they came and they saved the economy during the '08 financial crisis. So the least we can do for them is just let them basically buy all these houses. Let them price everybody in America out. No one can buy a home. No one wants to go start a family. And like that's the least we can do for Blackstone is allow them to basically corrupt the number one wealth creation vehicle for American citizens, which is owning a home and passing it on to their kids. Let's just price them out of that market. That's the least we can do for Blackstone. So Trump is like, fuck, we're losing in the midterms. He completely fucked up on every investigation. He's fucked up on the Epstein files. He's fucked up on the border. Well, the border is good, but he fucked up on deportations, just basically deporting all the wrong people, just good, hardworking people at random spot, kind of, and then all of these criminal gangs and whatnot. We haven't heard shit about them. He knows that he's fucked up most of the promises up until this point. The midterm elections look very bleak, and so now he's just grabbing for straws. He tried to go invade Venezuela just to bring gas prices down, so he has a shot in the midterms. You guys understand what I'm saying? So, Trump has completely whiffed it. He's trying to do whatever it takes. The Blackstone kind of that proposal, I'll believe it when I see it. If somebody introduces a bill in the House and it actually makes it to the Senate, then I'll believe it. Okay. I'm going to put in one more entry. It does look like the market wants to break. I told you guys if we continue to create support here, it's going to be very hard to kind of justify a kind of a deeper crash. But it just came back pretty good entry zone, and this would be a good place for a re-entry. I'm going to do this real quick on the paper trade, just so you guys can kind of see what that looks like. I'm going to pause the recording here while I hop on over to TradeAvate. And then what we'll do is, let's go see what CNBC and the rest and Squawk Box and them are saying about Jerome Powell. Fed Chair Powell says he faces, okay, let's see what Andrew Ross Sorkin has to say.
Administration now threat Powell over comments to Congress. The Trump administration now threatening to indict Fed Chair Jay Powell over comments to Congress about the Fed's renovation project. Eamon Javers is watching this morning with the latest. Good morning to you, Eamon.
Yeah, good morning, Andrew. Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell struck a defiant tone in an unprecedented video statement on Sunday night, revealing that the Department of Justice had served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas in an ongoing and previously unknown criminal investigation. Powell said the subpoenas were served Friday and relate to his testimony about the Federal Reserve's building construction project before the Senate Banking Committee last June. Now, President Trump has been deeply critical of Powell over the past year and has intently scrutinized cost overruns at the Fed's construction project. But Powell said the investigation is just a pretext.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation.
A Department of Justice spokesman told CNBC on Sunday that the Attorney General has instructed her U.S. attorneys to prioritize investigating any abuse of taxpayer dollars. Now, a source familiar with the investigation confirmed to CNBC last night that it is being run out of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, which is run by U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, a longtime political ally of President Trump. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt declined to comment last night. Powell's term as chairman ends in May, and President Trump has been interviewing candidates to take his place. It's not clear exactly what the Department of Justice may be investigating here, but President Trump's close political ally, FHFA Director Bill Pulte, as early as last summer, accused Powell of lying to Congress with his characterizations of the construction effort. Guys, a lot of questions here, not as many answers this morning. Back over to you.
Eamon, just on the merits of it, and we can get into everything else about it, because obviously the markets are reacting to it, and I think you're seeing a lot of reaction, even from some Republicans, though not many.
Guys, could this be? Remember we were talking about the gold spike yesterday? I'm pretty sure Frenchie was the one that brought it up. This actually could be a pretty big driver of that, which is sort of this rush to gold. Not sure what that's about, but kind of the timing is very peculiar. Market opens with a massive gap on gold. And then the only news that came out yesterday that was a big deal, there's been no other geopolitical news that's been big. It's just this Jerome Powell grand jury subpoena.
If you actually go back and look at his testimony,
If this thing starts to break bullish and starts to form a bullish candle to the upside, I'm probably going to cut my trade. Okay. We're creating that support here. It doesn't seem like we're coming back down to fill. We got to close under the 88.6. We have to continue to close under the 88.6 in order to expect that TP1. So right now, still valid, but just by the fact that it's continuing to hold that support and starting to reject back up, I'm just telling you guys to be mindful here that if this thing does break and close above, I'm going to be out of this trade.
is there anything in it that is suggestive that he was not truthful? And is there anybody in Congress that is beyond Bill Pulte, who's not in Congress, but is obviously a part of this administration? Is there anybody in Congress who's ever mentioned this before, ever?
Yeah, look, so a couple of things. I think, it's going to turn on the question of, how did Powell describe the luxury items, quote unquote, that are involved in this construction project. We'll see exactly what the DOJ is investigating here, but it'll, I think, be around his language about whether there are special sets of elevators, whether there's a special lunchroom, all that kind of thing. And what type of marble is being used, and whether those things are materially false. The challenge for the DOJ is that they're going to have to prove that it was a material discrepancy, first of all, and then it was done sort of with knowledge of foresight. And I think those things will be relatively high bars for them. And the danger here for the Department of Justice is they investigate here and they end up coming up empty. And that could cause them two problems. One, public embarrassment.
The
two,
person in
the President
Congress,
of the
there
United
is a
States could be very angry.
Tell us.
But not Tom. No, he commented on it, but the person who forwarded this, and she's taking credit for it, Representative Anna Paulina Luna. I have formally referred Jerome Powell to the DOJ for criminal investigation, and that was in back.
Okay, this is good. We that 30-minute candle closed under the 88.6, and now we have a really good shot here of filling this wick. So let's see if the entries that were taken kind of above my original entry, let's see if those better entries actually end up playing out. So we did get another closure under, very good sign. We have the open of a fresh 30-minute candle. And so let's see if we can get this rejection and fill back to the downside. Okay.
In July, when she did that with a letter. So that is the person and then she says she was gratified yesterday by this. So they're obviously that person.
What I was going to bring up is Tom.
I saw what he said.
The Republican senator who says that at this point he's put out a statement. If there were any remaining doubt about whether advisors within the Trump administration are actively pushing to end the independence of the Federal Reserve, there should be none now. He says he's going to oppose the confirmation of any nominee for the Fed, including the upcoming Fed chair vacancy, until it's resolved.
The other big piece is actually what Trump has said. And Eamon, I want to go over that with you because I don't know whether you've seen what he said or whether you believe in this case that what he's saying is accurate. He says the following. He says, I don't know anything about it, but he's certainly not very good at the Fed, and he's not very good at building buildings. This is what he told NBC News last night. He went on to say, I wouldn't even, when asked about whether this was about interest rates, I wouldn't even think of doing it that way. What should pressure him is the fact that rates are far too high. That's the only pressure he's got.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the questions for Powell will be, will he be able to get in the course of his defense effort any communications between the President of the United States and the Attorney General on this? That often is very protected information, and he might not be able to get to it. I don't know the legality of that in terms of the discovery process here, but that may be privileged. But I think Powell's attorneys will certainly weigh in on this and say that this is being directed by the president. They'll look for evidence that it was directed by the president. We've seen the president issue orders to Pam Bondi before. He's done it publicly in terms of things that he's posted on social media. So did he do that in this case? That'll be one of the
questions. He's going to try for cover. I mean, this is what Representative Luna said. I laid out in detail how Jerome Powell lied under oath to Congress and misrepresented facts. And I did this to administration officials, including Russ Vought, the OMB director. Unelected bureaucrats do not get a free pass. This is exactly why oversight exists, and I am thankful the DOJ is taking this seriously, knowing it's above the law. So,
Yeah.
you know, Trump can say, I don't know what's going on here, and point to and that's the way that they would orchestrate it. You can
The
imagine.
reality, legally though, the reality is that Congress doesn't matter here. I mean, this is a grand jury investigation, so the way it works is the prosecutors will discover evidence with these subpoenas. They'll present that to the grand jury if they feel like they have enough evidence to indict on criminal charges. They'll present that to the grand jury. If the grand jury hands down an indictment, the DOJ will indict Jay Powell. And Congress is not involved in this process at all. So, I mean, it matters to the extent that there's political support for it, but they can't stop it. Right. They can't stop it.
Once it's
And
clear, they
so
can't stop.
ultimately, you can have all the statements that you want, but the reality is, can the DOJ find enough evidence here to indict? If they indict, can they prove their case in court in front of a jury and in front of a judge? And that's the risk here, is that they'll end up bringing a case that they can't actually, get a conviction on.
Oh, and then the other question, though.
A grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. I think that was the phrase. A grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. They can indict Powell if they want to. This threat is very, very real.
But we talked for a long time about business executives who've been on the other side of Trump. I got a whole bunch of emails and texts from people last night, some of whom said, is this the moment that, effectively, is this the moment that I'm supposed to raise my hand? I mean, we've talked about sort of where there are red lines, and by the way, there have been lots of red lines ostensibly.
Talk that. I just named about 10 of them that Trump has crossed, between basically bombing Iran, which is an act of war, kidnapping the president of Venezuela, which is an act of war, without going to Congress. There's been a lot of oversteps here. So at what point do we raise our hand and be like, yo, hold on. This is too far. Enough is enough.
That have been crossed over the past
Well, it sounds like it's
8 months.
Right, and we'll see. I still think the system works, and we'll see how this proceeds. But
Andrew, you've talked to a lot of CEOs. I've talked to a lot of CEOs about this. Maybe probably not as many as you have, but all the CEOs I've talked to, off the record, on background, in private, say, we're not raising our hands to object to the president because we feel that with his psychology, with the way the president responds, he'll respond badly to any direct confrontation. And so what we want to do is work around the edges, suggest alternatives, work in private, try to reach out to Susie Wiles or other figures inside the administration to try to adjust things. But they're very wary of confronting the president directly.
But the question is on something like this,
that'll make things worse, and there's risk for them.
Whether there needs to be an effort, whether there deserves to be an effort, should be an effort to try to bring the temperature down and effectively have the White House effectively end such an investigation if you think that they would do such a thing, or not prosecute. That becomes the question.
But can they?
Well, the White House can, because the White House is likely involved to a large degree in this.
You're taking that a step too.
Yeah, I was going to say,
the White House is doing
baseline in terms of
you can't. I mean,
we gotta say allegedly, because the Trump administration is claiming they have nothing to do with this grand jury testimony. But that's like when Letitia James or James Comey or any of kind of Trump's opposition gets bagged, or gets arrested, or gets indicted, or gets some kind of criminal prosecution against them. The president can say that they had nothing to do with it, and the Justice Department is just doing their job. But we all know what's going on here. There's tons of crime going on, and there are a lot of people in the government to be prosecuting, especially with the Epstein files. If you were interested in prosecuting people in the government, there's a lot of places to start besides this guy overspending money. The government has overspent money. The president has overspent money. You're doing a $350 million renovation on the White House. Nobody asked you to. The last thing you want to do is drive criminal prosecution against the Federal Reserve Chairman, threaten the independence of the Fed, threaten the reputation of this relationship between the federal government and the Fed. And honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of the Fed either. But this is like, building the building is not the worst thing that they're doing. Printing the shit out of the currency and playing this sort of debasement of the currency game with the Treasury, where the Treasury just invents bonds and the Federal Reserve just creates money out of thin air and they trade with each other. Then it ruins the purchasing power of the average American while boosting the wealth of the wealthiest people in America. All right, that's a fucking crime. Excuse my French. The crime is not that he's overspending on the building. Like, that is a crime too, because that's taxpayer dollars. Well, it's not. It's Federal Reserve asset, but it's money that they should be kicking back to the Treasury. Because the Fed used to give profits from their open market operations to the Treasury. They would give them a kickback. The Fed hasn't given the Treasury a kickback since like 2022. They've been down under. They're going to spend $3 billion on renovations. That's inappropriate and that's irresponsible. But is it criminally prosecutable? Is this really what we're doing here? Ah, but name like 15 people in the federal government that we should prosecute first. Get Lindsey Graham's dumbass out first. I don't know. We'll let them play this out.
To get to that point, you have to assume the White House did it in the first place. If they put it on, they could take it off. But they're going to argue that they didn't put it on and that no one's above the law.
Well, you have to assume that Pirro is somehow completely independent of the president.
Okay, let's see who else is talking about this. Senator Mark Warner, geopolitical stress. Nope. Let's see what Fox Business has to say. They've been very pro-Trump on almost everything. We got Squawk Box over here, which just seems to be a short video. President Trump gaggles on Air Force One. We'll take a look at this. CNBC's full interview with White House National Economic Council Kevin Hassett. Okay, so Kevin Hassett weighed in on this. They sent Tony Blinken out. They're sending their A team out. They got Anthony Blinken. They got Kevin Hassett. They sent Senator Mark Warner to the front lines, though. They're down bad. Okay. Let's see what Kevin Hassett has to say. And then we'll jump over, kind of see what Trump.
Pretty cool, huh? That's the
Directly
laser
said.
strike system from us here.
All right. This is not looking too hot on the sell front. Not the most encouraging candle to be forming right now. If we get a closure in this range, I'll be closing the trade. I mean, ideally, this is what I would like to see to close the trade. We're going to get a closure above here. We're going to get a move back down to retest our zone. I'm going to want to close my trade here. And then as it continues up, hopefully I can get out and break even.
Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, thanks for being with us this morning.
Yeah, hey, Joe.
Mr. Director. If I call you Kevin, you could be, I mean, there's more than one Kevin. There's a Warst, there's a you're one of the two Kevins now, Kevin Hassett.
No.
There's plenty of Kevins. We want to talk about the employment report, all kinds of stuff, but it was preempted, I think, our discussion by, as you can imagine, some of the developments that happened yesterday.
Right.
Kevin, do you have any, what do you know exactly about the testimony that Jay Powell reportedly gave that would be considered perjury or perjurious in terms of that
Right.
building?
Like I've not been involved in conversations with the Justice Department about that. I've not talked to the Justice Department ahead of them contacting Jay, and so I don't really have anything to add other than I respect the independence of the Fed and the independence of the Justice Department, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, that's what, obviously, there's the way that things look, Kevin, and you can't, obviously, I can't, definitively say that this threatens the independence of the Fed, but in terms of optics, and what Jay Powell said, I'll hang it on what the chairman said. He said this was nothing more than a pretext to force him or to put pressure on him to do the president's bidding on lowering rates.
Well, in the fullness of time, we'll find out whether it looks like a pretext. But right now, we've got a building that's got like dramatic cost overruns, and plans for the buildings that look inconsistent with the testimony. But I'm not a Justice Department person. I hope everything.
So basically, they're saying Jerome Powell lied in his testimony to Congress about the exact scope and cost of the Fed building renovations. And because he lied, and now there are additions and I don't know what kind of secret things they're building over there they didn't tell the Congress about, but they're saying that it was perjury to have lied in his testimony. That's kind of where the indictment's coming from, is perjury in front of Congress, which is crazy.
Turns out okay for Jed.
Some of the prospective candidates to replace Chair Powell have been outspoken about problems within the Federal Reserve. Now, there are some people that say, look, they should have probably raised rates more quickly and taken away some of the punch bowl to keep inflation under control. But others say since then, and you would argue, I think, Kevin, that the economy is in good shape from a lot of different viewpoints. I don't know.
The economy might be in good shape, but this trade is not. It's not looking too hot. I told you guys my exit strategy for this, and hopefully we kind of get that break back under before it continues to pop. That way we can close out in maybe a little bit of profits or in break even.
Whether the Fed gets any credit, but at worst, at least they didn't stop some of these positive things from happening. Are there deep-seated problems at the Fed, in your view, institutionally?
I think that what I'd like to see at the Fed, regardless of who's Fed chair, is just a little bit more introspection. That, you know, we let inflation get out of control. It'd be nice to know how that happened, and nice to know that we have a plan to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that,
What do you mean? Like, we got to figure out how it happened. Biden printed $3 trillion when we were at 6.2% inflation. And then inflation skyrocketed to 9% 2 months later. And then the Fed had to step in and basically raise interest rates for the first time in 15 years. So yeah, we know exactly how the inflation crisis got exacerbated. First, Trump and his squad printed so much money in 2020 as a response to COVID that basically it just bastardized the entire financial system. 30% of all dollars in circulation in 2020 had been printed between 2020, 2021, and 2022. Like by 2022, 30% of the total dollar supply in the world had been printed in those 3 years. So like, yeah, if you're gonna basically like up the entire volume of the currency, or like the what do we call it? The total money supply. If you're going to up the money supply by 30%, then yeah, it's going to inflate all the goods and services in the economy by at least 30%. That's how inflation happened.
that kind of stuff, I think, would be great for the world economy. But, you know, I mean, the bottom line is that the economy is booming right now because of Trump's policies, not because of the Fed. The Fed had.
Yeah, it looks like the market's going to continue to break to the upside. If we get just at least one rejection, that's when I'll close the trade. I don't want this thing to continue to form this 30-minute candle as a clean break up. If we can at least get some kind of pullback here, that would be ideal, but obviously not guaranteed.
As amongst the highest interest rates on earth right now. And President Trump is frustrated with that. But I don't think that has anything to do with what was going on this weekend.
Steve, this is Apex. Well, I'm trading on Apex right now through Tradeovate. And so there's a link in the description if you want somewhere to go, but that's just the one that I'm using.
Really? They have been cutting, obviously. They're what we've had, you know, they are in an easing mode at this point. I thought that might have satisfied the president, since he's not going to be there that much longer. I know Representative Luna did forward some of the, I guess, the information she had about the perjurious claim to the Justice Department, and it came from that. But the president, I guess we take it. Do you take him on face value? He had nothing to do with putting pressure on the Justice Department to pursue this?
Yeah, I think the president has been very vocal about what he thinks about interest rates. I don't think that there's any mystery about that. That he's frustrated that there were big cuts right before the election. He's frustrated that when he came in 2017, that there were big hikes before he's inaugurated. And so he has lots of frustration with what he views as the partisanship of the Fed. But this right here is a legal matter. And again, I've not been briefed on what the Justice Department is thinking. And I expect the president has not as well.
Kevin, what do you think just about the perception around the rule of law? And the conversation we were having at the table earlier is just that there are lots of Americans who look at these kinds of things, this instance in particular, but you can go back and look at what would happen to some of the law firms and some of the media companies and others that were specifically publicly targeted by the president in the context of saying these are our enemies, these are folks that we don't like, and then efforts to prosecute them, and whether that undermines the rule of law and undermines the legitimacy that Americans feel about the law.
Didn't I just say this? Is that Trump going at there's a perception of the conflict of interest, even if there's not an actual what does it say, like an actionable conflict of interest where the Justice Department is being ran by the executive branch and the executive branch is the one telling them what to do here. There's still the perception of it, and not a good look for people's confidence in the rule of law and the independence of these different agencies to be working by themselves. The Justice Department is supposed to look at the letter of the law and follow it. And everybody else is just trying to get their sort of advantage.
You know, there sure is a possibility of that. I think we can all remember that it was 80 something times that, you know, each one really, I think, ill-advisedly, where President Trump was indicted. But the bottom line is that we have law enforcement officials whose job it is to make sure that things are okay, that we don't have fraud like we see in Minnesota. And so, you know, I think that if, you know, you're sitting here in the White House and somebody says, hey, Justice Department wants to look at all your emails or look at what you've been doing on this or that, then I would welcome the opportunity to show them that I'm fine. You know, and I also think that that's what I would expect of every government employee.
Okay.
That you want
Fair,
government
very fair.
employees to sort of say, hey, yeah, here's my proof that there's you've been nothing like the Minnesota thing going on. And you know,
Ooh.
anyway, so it's part of government to have people look at you, inspectors general, and check that what you're doing is completely on the up and up. And I think that it's part of government here and at the Fed as well.
Kevin, can you
I'm going to start to de-risk this trade. So I'm going to close like one contract at a time here. I'll do this on the paper trade first, and then while this plays, I'm going to go hop over to TradeAvate and do the same thing. So I have 4 contracts open on TradeAvate. I'm going to leave 1 contract open. I'm going to close 3. That's probably what I'll do here.
just weigh in on the state of the labor market in the U.S. right now? There's so many different cross currents in terms, you know, the immigration policies, the participation rate. We had, you know, 50,000 wasn't as high as expectations, but the rate fell from 4.6 to 4.4%. Do you consider 4.4% pretty close to full employment at this point?
No. That's the answer is no. I actually got out at a pretty good price. It's probably a little bit above the 88. I got it at around the 92%, which is a pretty good entry price. You know, like I really want to re-enter this, but just out of respect for my own risk kind of rules that I've set, I chose to de-risk the trade. If we push all the way down to TP2, then I'll be able to recoup the losses. If not, then that's trading.
Right. Well, it's changing for 2 reasons. It's changing because we've got government employees that have been laid off because President Trump is reducing government spending. That's about 250,000 workers this year. That's a lot. And we also have people who are being, you know, deported and re-domiciled because they were here illegally and working. And I think if you add those 2 things, then a good, healthy labor report is probably closer to 70,000 than 140, 150,000, which is what it was back in the day. And so bottom line right now, I'm looking at the output numbers, and we got GDP now. They're really working. spurring production. They're causing factories to build. And in the fullest of time, I expect that to job blowout in the second half of next year, especially.
We were, putting the prediction markets all over our screens last week with Warsh in the lead, Warsh in the lead over the Kevin. And I know you said,
I feel like the prediction market is going to replace this, what the stock market really has turned into, which is this giant sort of like gambling ring, where people are just sort of like gambling on their opinion about what's going to happen next, as opposed to looking at the fundamentals of an investment and actually making a sound investment choice. Like Warren Buffett's entire strategy is value investing, looking at the actual price versus the value of a company. How much are they bringing in? How much are they worth? What's their growth potential? What's their financials versus whatever they're charging for you to get in. But the markets have turned into like, I think the market's going to go up. I think the market's going to go down. And it's become this sort of like betting algorithm. So that betting markets like Poly Market and some of these other third-party prediction markets allow people to just bet on anything. What color tie Jerome Powell is going to wear, what the inflation rate is going to be, whatever. And so those have sort of replaced the gamification of what the stock market was. So for CNBC and Squawk Box to sort of be putting up the prediction market results on their screen, number one, shows me that the prediction market people have already infiltrated the advertising and the financial sector. And number two is that these financial companies or like these mainstream media financial analysis brands like CNBC and Yahoo and Bloomberg and the rest are willing to go down the degeneracy of promoting these gambling apps. Those things are going to be so destructive, people. If you have an incentive for a certain outcome to happen and there is so much money on the line, that's where a lot of rigging starts to come in. Just throwing that out there. We see it in sports, and we sure as hell will see it if the betting markets are going to become a mainstream, like a mainstay here in the mainstream media. So be prepared to see that.
Good man.
I know you said I'm really happy with the job I have here, and we'll see what the president thinks about where I should be. I actually did see some people saying that you would be sorely missed at the National Economic Council, where you are now as a director. You got that nice office, which I saw when I was down there visiting the president. And you are a good spokesperson. You couldn't be the same type of spokesperson not spokesperson, but you obviously are an advocate for the president's policies, and you can't do that necessarily. I mean, even coming on today after the developments of yesterday, you'll go anywhere, anytime to defend what the administration
without
is
talking
doing.
points, by the way.
Yeah, without talking about. So I can see that to some extent. Do you think you'll end up staying where you are and it's going to be someone else? Do you have any viewpoint on that at all that you can share with us?
You know, what really happens with my life here in the White House is I come in every day and I do my job. And I'll do that tomorrow. I'm doing it today. And if my job changes, then I'll start doing some other job. But no, I don't have time to like speculate about what might happen in the future because we have so much to do today.
So I mean, I'll at least give Kevin Hassett credit for one thing, which is I think he really believes it. I really do think that he's either completely naive and he believes exactly what because like coming on without talking points to CNBC, pretty risky thing to do for a lot of these guys, but it also shows that you truly support or understand or like you feel like you are in the right in this scenario. So obviously, as the economic advisor, he has nothing to do with Jerome Powell getting a subpoena from a grand jury, because that's a Justice Department issue. And so he really does have the cover to be like, but this is not my wheelhouse. I have nothing, which is probably why they sent him out there. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is a little bit more closely related to the Fed because they have those kind of open market operations together. There's this very close, tight-knit relationship ever since money printing kind of like really became a mainstay. And so that's probably why they're not sending Scott Bessent out there to talk about it. This is really cool, actually. Howard Lutnick and Chamath Palihapitiya on the All In podcast. We'll see that here in a bit. But I want to stay on this Jerome Powell topic here just long enough to figure out what the hell is going on. Oh, Fox Business. This is what I want to see.
If you have ED,
What the fuck, man? What is YouTube degenerated into besides gold ads, Manscaped, and fucking Blue Chew alternatives? This is what's wrong with America, bro. Now, let me tell you guys one thing is if you haven't already closed the shorts, or if you were looking for a better entry to close, this is looking pretty good. We actually could see a potential push back inside even. And so I still have that one contract running. I'll sort of just be holding that all the way through. As soon as we break back under the 88, or if we break back under the 88, I'll be protecting that trade. And sort of just protecting my entry. Okay.
Supreme Court expected to rule as Welcome back. President Trump's sweeping tariffs are facing a landmark test at the Supreme Court, with the Supreme Court expected to rule as soon as this Wednesday. The court weighing whether the White House can use emergency powers under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA. A decision could reshape the president's trade agenda and put hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff revenue at risk. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says it would be no problem for the U.S. to cover the tariff refunds if the court rules against the administration, noting that Treasury has over $750 billion on hand. A lot to talk about this morning with White House Senior Counselor for Trade and Manufacturing, Peter Navarro. Peter, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here this morning. And I want to begin on this IEPA situation because we think this is going to have a big impact on markets, although I know that the administration is ready for whichever decision comes down. What are your expectations in terms of the alternatives to that emergency tariff revenue? And I believe it's about more than 50% of the overall revenue raised through tariffs, right?
Well, any of the alternatives, Maria, are what we call in economics a second best alternative. Clearly, first principles here. The world cheats us. Because the world cheats us, we've got massive trade deficits, which basically tear down our economy, export our jobs, and our family.
All right, Peter Navarro. That's exactly what I want to hear. Trump says U.S. will ban institutional investors from buying single-family homes. This was the news that I was talking about earlier, by the way.
$1 in credit card debt in the third quarter of 2025.
So we can find all the relevant info.
Also announced a major policy shift aimed at improving housing affordability, taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying single-family homes as the House passes the Homes Act. And of course, the big story of the morning is Jay Powell is under.
Yeah, so it looks like the market's going to continue to break to the upside. If you guys want to close out, now would probably be a better time as opposed to waiting for a break. That's the gamble right now, is that this thing could come back in for one more retest, which, like, say it's not an unfair assumption. That's kind of that's how I'm trading, on the assumption that we get at least one more retest in. But the market could also just continue to break to the upside because of the momentum is so strong. And so if you guys don't want to risk that upside, that potential upside risk, which is if it just breaks through, then you'd want to close now as opposed to holding for the next 20, 30 points of drawdown. If you decide to take the risk, that's why I decided to cut some of my position down, 75% of my position down. That way I can hold this thing all the way through, as opposed to kind of feeling that pressure of holding the full position in drawdown. De-risking, very important for the mental clarity and the ability to stay focused. Because if you just start to get panicky, or you're just too leveraged in and you're in drawdown, you're going to start to get irrational in your decision making. We all will. And so it's important to know yourself and build those guardrails to protect your trading account. So let's see how this plays out. We got another probably 20-ish, maybe 20, 30 minutes until we get our answer here. And so let's play this thing out. If you're a savage and you re-entered at this 92% mark, like where we're at right now, let me know in the chats. You would be a savage for that.
Investigation. Already you heard from Senator Tom Tillis saying, look, he's going to oppose the confirmation of any nominee at the Fed, including the upcoming Fed chair vacancy, until this legal matter is fully resolved. He seems to believe this is all politics. Your reaction to all of this, Peter?
Well, let's start with the credit card debt. Like the mafia can't charge as much interest rates. as these credit card companies do. I mean, let's face it, if their business model is driven by screwing the American people, then that's a business model, a bad business model. They're giving credit cards out to 5-year-olds. It's just, they need to get their house in order, and President Trump's standing up for the American people. With respect to housing, this is such a key issue. Housing is the American dream. The problem with large institutional investors coming in is they crowd the legitimate people out of the market. They come in, all cash deals. They don't have to go through anything that Americans do. President says, no mas, no more. We're going to deal with that. And the other part of that issue, Maria, is they come in, they buy the homes, and they rent them out, and you see rents immediately jump. And there's really good data on how large institutional investors are really driving the higher housing costs. So that problem is going to be taken care of. With respect to Chairman Powell, first of all, the Fed is politicized. Chairman Powell is the worst Fed chair since Arthur Burns, and he is the poster child for politicizing the Fed. The only reason why he's still there is because he papered over the fiscal irresponsibility of Joe Biden and got America into an inflation crisis that President Trump is in the process of curing. So spare me on that. But if you actually look at what he's being investigated for. I mean, look, it looks like there's like luxury elevators and dining rooms. He claims that the thing was never renovated before when in fact it was. And it's just, let's see what the investigation says. And the funny part, Powell gets up there and says it's politicized and it's the tariffs that's the problem, why the costs went up. Hey, come on, Jay. Just do your job. Since you got there, you made 3 major blunders that have cost this economy $1 trillion easily. So
this guy's such a clown. So what they're referring to is that every like basically 50 basis points or every percentage point that they cut the interest rate will save us, I think it was like $300 or $400 billion in interest expense this year. And so when they're saying it costs the economy $1 trillion because of his mistakes, it's like they want him to drop the interest rates to the point where we can basically save $1 trillion in cost this year, and we can look like geniuses. Because then we have to borrow for the first time ever, the federal government would not have to borrow from the Fed in order to finance the federal budget, which is a pretty big deal. What's the other side of this? The other side of this is that we get an inflation crisis, and we go right back to 2022. So everybody who wants their stocks to go up, who wants the economy to start booming, all the crypto guys who are holding a shit ton of crypto assets, everybody wants lower rates because it's going to stimulate the economy. And if you're an asset holder, you will be a beneficiary. Who gets screwed? 90% of this country who doesn't own enough assets to benefit from this giant inflation. Everybody just has to pay more at the grocery store, pay more at the gas station, pay more for rent. And they don't own assets, so they don't get to take advantage of this big upside. What the hell's the point? These guys want to get up here because they're rich and they own a bunch of assets, and they want to tell everybody else that this is what we should be doing, knowing it's going to screw the whole country over. And the wealth gap is going to continue to grow and grow and grow and spread until the fuse busts. So I think Jerome Powell is holding the line of sanity by keeping interest rates high, because right now, with 4.4% unemployment rate, and I think they said it jumped up to 4.6. Let's take a look at the unemployment rate. We're gearing into recession territory. We were at 3.6%, and then we went to 3.8, and then we went to 4, and then we went to 4.2, then we went to 4.4. Anything above the 4% unemployment number, to me, is the beginning of a recessionary cycle. Once we get up to the 4.4s, that's basically, we're damn near recession. That's recessionary territory. Anything above this, we're talking about 4.6, 4.8% unemployment rate. We're in a recession. So by having this much dry powder, if we do enter a recession here, the Fed can just cut rates, and get us right back on track. And so I think Jerome Powell has made a very smart choice by keeping that dry powder to the side. I genuinely believe that. So we had consumer sentiment. We had the JOLTS jobs report here. The forecast was 7.6 million open jobs, but there was only 7.15. The JOLTS jobs reports is hirings, layoffs, voluntary leave. It's basically just tracks the amount of open jobs in the economy. So when they say 7.15 million, that means that there's 7.15 million unoccupied jobs in the US economy. Now, that's way lower than the expectation. There's two reasons for that. One, you could read this and be like, okay, well, a lot more people have taken jobs than were expected. We thought we had a lot of open jobs, but it looks like people are hiring. For me, I see this as the exact opposite, is a lot of those jobs are no longer available because there's no demand for that labor. There's two ways to read this. We'll be able to look at the JOLTS report, which I really haven't done since last week. We have NFP that came out last week. Okay, so we have actually made a quick downturn here where the previous unemployment rate was 4.6, and it actually came out at 4.4. So now we're starting to make a move back in the right direction to avoid that recessionary territory. But since July of last year, you guys can see we went from 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4. In December, it was 4.6. And now we've started to kind of shift back to 4.4, which usually doesn't happen. Now, this could be a retest, like a little kind of dip back to the right direction before it continues high. Or this could be Trump trying to salvage this unemployment crisis. But this is heading into recessionary territory for sure. Okay? Let's hear, remind me again who this is. Don't tell me this is Peter Navarro.
Let's see what happens with this investigation. The only question is, Maria, we know he made false statements. The only question is whether he was aware and did it with malice. And think about that. If he was ignorant about it, that tells you how ignorant he is when he runs Fed policy.
Made false statements. What was the false statements? Do you know specifically?
This is crucial. They're going to explain exactly the nature of the accusations against him. Where did he lie and what did he lie about? Let's see if we can get a clear answer here from Peter Navarro.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You can run through the list. First of all, I said there has been. He claimed that there's no luxury stuff in there. You got elevators, you got private dining rooms. So there's certainly more than smoke.
None of that is true. They looked through, and that was one of the complaints that Trump had. There was no rooftop terrace. There is no private dining rooms. But I also don't believe that because the Fed building is one of the hardest buildings to get into. When I was working at Merrill Lynch, the Federal Reserve building was right next door. And occasionally some of the advisors would have meetings over there. I'm not going to go into too much detail. But you basically needed a security clearance, 3 referrals, a background check, and like you got to send a selfie with you and like your third ex or something to these people just to even get in. It's like getting a payout from one of these prop firms or like KYC for one of these offshore brokers. I want you to send a baby picture of you holding a date newspaper with that date. There are so many hoops and hurdles to jump through to get into the Fed buildings. I wouldn't be surprised if they did include in their renovations sort of like stuff that was not listed on the books or they didn't really want to advertise. So that doesn't surprise me at all that they would have done that. But there's currently no proof that any of these amenities that Peter Navarro just mentioned are actually in the plans.
The question is going to revolve around, Maria, whether he knowingly made false statements. And again, the irony here is like, okay, if he didn't know he was making false statements, it kind of reflects about how much he doesn't know about Fed policy when he goes out and makes his bad decisions. I mean, remember, Maria, he's consistently being on the wrong end. It's too late, pal, too early, pal. It's like his whole tenure has been marked by costing this economy. I mean, in our first term, Maria, I remember when he started raising rates too fast. Later, the Fed itself said that was a stupid thing to do. He was too late when Biden was in, driving up all the inflationary pressures. It was Joe Biden and Jay Powell that let the inflation genie out of the bottle. And so, and it spared me this like.
Okay, well, who first printed all the money? Let's be honest. I mean, obviously, this has been going on since basically the Bretton Woods conference. But for real, after the tech bubble burst, we started to introduce money into the system. The Fed had a much bigger role to play in restabilizing the economy. And then in the 2008 financial crisis, it was basically let the entire global financial system collapse or bail them out with a ton of money printing. So we started quantitative easing. That was the first QE facility, 2008, 2009, I believe. And then we had the second QE facility in 2010, and then we had the third QE facility in 2012. So they were just pumping money through quantitative easing by buying back assets from the market. Then Obama introduced the TARP program, which was a fiscal bailout for average people and for banks. So that's where the money printing really kind of started. Then we had 15 years of this money printing environment. And then the last QE facility was bigger than the first three combined. The one that basically when we started doing quantitative easing as a result of COVID. Who was in charge during COVID? Who had Operation Warp Speed and actually put the COVID vaccine out there? It was Trump. Who was the first person to bring all the banks and the corporations together for this bailouts kind of program and for the stimulus checks and everything else? That was Trump. Trump sent out the first stimmy checks. Right? And then Biden came in when we already had inflation and then continued these policies of printing all the way through 2021 and then through 2022 when we had 9% inflation. This was a joint effort. Let's not pretend like let's not pretend like his hands are clean in his culpability for the inflation crisis.
Oh, Fed independent stuff and Tom Tillis and all that stuff. Come on.
Yeah.
That's a politicized body. And he's the worst chairman since Arthur Burns started running the money pump for Richard Nixon for re-election. So let's get to the bottom of this. But there's a lot of good stuff going on with President Trump. Mind you this.
Yeah, I know that there is. But I just want to say this. The Senate Democrats are going to move to stop the president as they have been doing anyway. But, Elizabeth Warren is out. Tom Tillis is out. They're all talking about, this is abuse. So they're going to start being even more aggressive when it comes to the president's Federal Reserve nominees. You know that. And they're going to move to not confirm anybody. But we're going to be watching that story. I want to get your take on the U.S. is challenging China and its dominance of rare earths. Look, China is a big.
All right, that's a much bigger topic that I know for a fact
Do you
they're
have
not.
Do you have a clean?
Bro, what the hell is wrong with these commercials? No one gives.
Trump administration now.
Okay, let's see what we have here. Mark Warner, nope. We already saw Kevin Hassett break this down. I do want to go back and watch this, but this is not going to be something we do on this stream. All right, guys, we're getting that retest back inside the range, just like we were talking about earlier. So if you haven't closed already, you might be getting your opportunity here. I believe that, kind of just to give you guys a little bit of education here, time frames. Ideally, for situations like this, as long as the market closes above these wicks, so it can come all the way down to break the bodies, but as long as it closes above these wicks, then that could still be a potential bullish move. And so that would be kind of the expectation here is that if the market does break back inside, that it would break through the body a little bit and then push back above. But if you guys haven't closed, you do have an opportunity here. Again, you have to think about not what you think is going to happen next, because you'll never know. It's about risk. So you just saw what it looked like to be in drawdown an extra 20, 30 points. If that was too much for you, you have a choice here to de-risk. That way you can clearly and calmly stay in the trade. Right? So that you're not overextended. You're not way past your comfort zone in terms of risk. You can actually let this thing play out. And so that zone that's at right now, this is going to be like, if you're going to cut your risk or forever hold your peace sort of deal. Let's see, Fox Business. I want to do Jerome Powell, Trump. Let's see. Who did a really good video about this? Jerome Powell. Let's actually just go through the ringer. Let's actually do Bloomberg. Let's see what Bloomberg has to say. Dude, Bloomberg is down bad on these views. No wonder. Let's take a look at Yahoo Finance. 200 views? Bro, what is going on here? All right, let me go find something else. We already did Fox, but let's just try Fox again.
This is a Fox News alert. As we just discussed before the break, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says the Department of Justice served the Fed with a grand jury subpoena related to his testimony before the Senate Banking Committee at the Fed headquarters. Now, in a statement, Powell before the Senate Banking Committee last June. The New York Times is reporting that a criminal investigation has been opened into the chairman over those renovations at the Fed headquarters. Now, in a statement, Powell says, quote, "This unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings." So, guys, he is basically saying this is a pretext. Trump has been, the president, very critical of the chairman here on interest rates on a number of fronts. It's very clear that there's no love lost there. Trump has sparred with that guy over these renovations, and now there's this criminal investigation.
He just called Jerome Powell that guy. Are you out of your fucking mind?
Apparently into it. I've lived through enough Trump drama to wait and see what the actual facts are before leaning in too much into any narrative. But Joey, you know that the narrative coming from at least one side here is going to be Trump hates Powell. He's been pressuring Powell for a long time. And now here's the Justice Department swooping in. It's political. What do you think?
I think that any sunshine is good. That's what I think. I think our federal government, in a way, is at war with itself in a very partisan way. I mean, that's kind of obvious. We saw the previous president under the Biden administration, the previous president get investigated and indicted in several different ways. A lot of it really completely fell apart, and the rest of it continues to. So there's one side of it. The other side of it is, through all of that, I learned that we had one previous president that had documents at Mar-a-Lago that probably shouldn't be there. We had another one that had documents in his carport that shouldn't be there. And now we're learning that a Fed chair might have lied under testimony about splurging on renovations that he shouldn't have. What do we get from all this? Hopefully the next generation of leaders think twice before they pad their own pockets or do anything that by the letter of the law they shouldn't do. So I think it's ultimately a good thing that we have to live through this if there's some sunshine on the back end. I don't know it's going to turn into some sort of conviction, but hey, if you didn't do anything wrong, I guess don't be upset if they're looking.
Tommy, it seems to me that we're going to get probably some high decibel opposition to what will be framed as lawfare from a party that has largely celebrated lawfare when the shoe's on the other foot. But if there's some truth to the criticism, is it a fair thing to say maybe we shouldn't be going after political enemies using the power of criminal prosecutions?
No
shit. Weaponization, no matter who does it. But to Joey's point, you know, if we get something out of it, again, it's too early to know what this all entails. When you hear it's about renovations, it's like HGT.
All right. I'm jumping fully out. If it crashes, it crashes. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my stops on TradeEvate kind of exactly where I have them here on this sim. Just above the previous high. I'm going to let this thing sit. If it comes back in, perfect. If it doesn't, then so be it. All right, I'll even move my take profit here. It'll be kind of like a 1-to-1 situation. All right, just kind of a side note here. I'm about to hop off this stream in probably 10-ish minutes, but we'll play the rest of this Fox Business video and see what they got going on.
I mean, I'm like, what are we talking about? But President Trump is very passionate about building projects. And we remember that squabble that the two had last year, side by side, I believe, when they were looking at some of the renovations. So maybe we shouldn't be surprised.
Well, and that project, by the square footage, is the most expensive government building ever made. And so that is worth looking at. And if they found something, maybe that's what this is.
I'm going to put in one piece of commentary here. There's definitely this thing in government where you inflate the price of something and give your boys the contract so everybody eats. I think that's what Jerome Powell really did. A lot of contractors, a lot of people getting way overpaid, way too much consultants and all this other crap in between, and everyone's eating. And this is kind of like Jerome Powell's way of lining up people's pockets on the way out. So it is a legitimate thing to kind of bring up, but clearly the Trump doesn't give a fuck about that because he's doing a lot of that himself. I think that he's using this as a ploy to pressure Jerome Powell to lower the interest rates. think it's really just that simple. Like, yes, Jerome Powell's doing something wrong. No, Trump doesn't give a fuck about it. That's not why they're going after him, because the Trump administration is doing a lot of this similar activity themselves. And so that's where we're at.
Result of.
Yeah. So Nicole, the shouting has already started. I would like to see some of the depth here, but I wonder what you think.
Well, if a Fed chair misled Congress on a multi-billion-dollar project, then, accountability is the right thing to do. I mean, I guess the budget was 1.9 and it ballooned to 2.5, and there's some question as to being misleading Congress. I mean, that's a big problem. This is taxpayer dollars. But I would say that you have to be very careful.
An extra $1 billion of money that they added to this project to just throw to their boys. That's insanity.
About turning the DOJ against an independent Fed, because that risks putting the United States financial system could potentially erode confidence on the world scale.
I just want to rephrase what I had to say. My point is mutually assured destruction should not be a path in D.C. to assured corruption. And I think that's a part, maybe not in huge, but that's a part of the D.C. culture that I've seen. Hey, we're not going to go after that person because they might come after us. And I think that's going away. Whether it's good or bad for us, I don't know. I think it could be good.
Now, Powell's term, of course, is winding down. He's reacting to this. We read some of the statement. Apparently, we have some sound from him as well.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation.
All right, so that is basically the accusation. He's saying this has nothing to do with renovations. It has nothing to do with what I said before Congress. The president wanted me to do X. I wouldn't do it because I'm independent and I'm being punished and potentially, indicted or investigated for it. And he's saying this is really a fight over an independent Fed moving forward. That's the way he's framing this up, Tommy.
Yeah, well, and also it kind of harkens back to Comey and Letitia James and some of the cases against them that ultimately didn't result in much. So we'll see what we've got here. I mean, listen, when we talk about taxpayer dollars, it's important that we have all the information. Apparently, there was enough here to do this, so I'd like to see the evidence. But we know what the other side is going to say, and it's a pretty easy route for them to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Trump's ire towards Jerome Powell is pretty obvious and evident. And so you've given the other side this talking point. It's just what comes of it. If they actually find things that are pretty obviously illegal, then that talking point goes away.
This is on the DOJ to really put forth what this evidence was, because they're right. They were walking into criticism, which, by the way, I can understand, too. I mean, all you've heard is criticism from President Trump about Jerome Powell, and now all of a sudden we're hearing about this. So the impetus is on the DOJ to make sure that they have a very sound case here right now, and this is not political weaponization.
Yep, the evidence has to be really solid and compelling.
Okay, we get it. All right, y'all. I'm closing out the rest of my contract, the one contract that I still had. This it was a pretty good idea for a trade. I think that we were in profits from that 88.6 drop. Pretty quick, pretty solid trade there if you did capitalize. But when we go back up to the higher time frames, as I was saying very early on in the stream, is that the more times that you touch that higher time frame zone, the more times that you bump up, you bump up against that. This 1, 2, 3, this triple top, at some point there's going to be a break. All right, and we had seen this on where is it? Right here. Right, when we were looking at this higher time frame play, we said we've already had so many rejections at the zone. At some point, it's likely to break through because the zone gets weaker and weaker as you retest. But because of the premium price that we were at, that's why I wanted to short. If we go up to the daily, the next zone of interest here, let me just close out of all this stuff. The next zone of interest, if we look at the range that we're playing at, we have the high and the low. Go ahead and draw our fib. We've already had a beautiful 88.6 rejection, beautiful 88.6 rejection, and we are right back at that zone. And so this is the ideal selling zone. That's why I don't regret this trade at all. This is the ideal selling zone. But we could come all the way up for a double top here. Right? All the way up, probably another 200 points, 300 points, and then see a big rejection off the double top. So that's going to be the next big area of interest that I watch. We had a beautiful trade already from that 88.6 down to TP2. Like just absolutely beautiful. Climbed back up and then retested the 61. And then now we're coming up for a double top of the 88.6. The sell is looking more and more valid kind of at this higher time frame daily. But if we do break through, then just look for the double top. Put a 1 in the chats if you guys understand what I just broke down here with the range. The trade is valid. If we reject this double top up here, the trade is still valid. But if it does break through and create that bullish push to the upside, then we'll just look for the higher time frame double top up here. Capiche? All right, y'all. Happy and safe trading, everybody. If you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to us. If you're a ChartAddicts member, obviously, just put your markups in the chat. Let us see what you're looking at. You can get feedback. You can get maybe some confirmation. You can get some added context. And so I highly recommend that if you are a member to take advantage. And if you guys are watching this on YouTube, want to become a member, head on over to our website. We have running a great promotion, 40% off. Make sure to take advantage. All right. Happy and safe trading, everybody. Great to see you guys on the stream. If you did not win a trade today, there's no reason for you to go in there and try to force the money back. The next trade will make up for it. But you got to have the ammo to take advantage of that next trade. So do not blow it all back. Make sure you're being very responsible and methodical. And that's what keeps you in the game. Discipline equals freedom. Happy and safe trading, everybody. We'll catch you guys on the next stream. Peace. All right, members. So you win some, you lose some. This was a great